And welcome to another edition of Truth Frequency. I am your host, Chris Gio, and I'm joined as always by the lovely socio student. It is December 17th, and we have a magnificent show for you today, ladies and gentlemen. Joining us in just a few minutes will be Michael Tsarion. You can find his work at michaeltsarion.com. He is a researcher, a lecturer, an author, and an alternative historian. Michael is best known for his work on symbol literacy, Atlantis, the alien agenda. But today we're going to be discussing his new DVD about mind control. That's called Architects of Control. You can find that at architectsofcontrol.com. And I urge everybody to pick up a copy because it's one of the most profound DVDs that I've ever seen in my entire life. So without any further ado, because Michael has so much information to talk about, this is actually going to be part one of a two-part show. Let's go ahead and bring Michael Tsarion on the line. We'll be right back in just a few minutes. This is truthfrequency.com.
Everywhere I go, everywhere I travel, I see people. The whole planet is full of them. Some walk alone, some with a companion, and others go about in groups. Human beings is the name they go by, and they sure love to live huddled together in big, sprawling cities. They all seem very busy doing this and that, and getting on with their lives. Yep, the people of the world tend to look very productive and in charge. If I went and talked to any of them, if I went and interviewed people and asked each of them whether they think they're in charge of their own destinies, I wonder what kind of answers I'd get. Most of them would confidently say, sure, I'm in charge of my own life path. And what about me? Am I really in charge of my own destiny? Do I know where I've come from, why I'm here, and where I'm going? After all, some people would say that just by using this credit card, I'm a virtual serf to powerful men who profit from my existence. Some have said we're all veritable slaves in an invisible penitentiary. If that's the case, then none of us are in charge of our lives. We only think we are, and that's kind of frightening. Maybe that invisible prison does exist. Maybe I can't see it because I've been trained not to be able to see it. Can that situation never change? After all, I sure don't like to think of myself as being on someone else's chain. I think it's time to investigate these matters. When in doubt, find out. That's the key. There are those who've looked into these matters long before my time. What did they have to say? That's what I'd like to know.
And that's what I'd like to know as well. So coming up right now to tell us all about it is the one and only Michael Tsarion. He is a researcher, a lecturer, an author, a filmmaker, and an alternative historian. You can find his work at michaeltsarion.com, and of course his new DVD is out, Architects of Control, and you can find more information at architectsofcontrol.com. Michael, do we have you on the line?
Okay. Chris, yeah, hi, Jim.
Hey, Michael, can you adjust your settings a little bit because you're coming in a little bit unclear?
Okay, is the volume, am I coming in okay, yeah?
Oh, yes. Now that's coming in crystal clear. Let me just say, Michael, that it was, I just want to thank you for using my song We're in a Lot of Trouble on your last DVD. It was the kick that I needed to get in the direction that I am now and to start this radio show and put the CD out. It was that hey, there's somebody paying attention and people are starting to pay attention. And it drove me in the direction. So I really, really thank you for that. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, the topics that you touch upon for some of the listeners that aren't familiar with your work?
Well, it's mutual, so thank you. Yeah, we all have to do what we can, And, thanks for, the opportunity to speak with you guys.
Oh, absolutely.
Of course,
anytime.
Those who know me know that my journey started in Ireland or in Britain. I guess it started, there's many threads, of course, but generally I've always been interested in philosophy and metaphysics, and my family was, or at least some members of my family were sort of tied up, involved with the New Age movement, and, that has both good and bad aspects to it, but just it was always generally brought up to think of life, in broader terms, metaphysical terms, study philosophy and literature and the Eastern mysticism and all of that. But very quickly, I could see that there was a lot of other questions that, some of the groups that I was involved with or the people I knew, they weren't really getting to answer a lot of the things that I wanted, or the questions that I started to have, sometimes just because they didn't have the interest in the subjects I was studying. But I'm a kind of person who, you go in and you study something. It doesn't mean you join it or belong to it. You sort of find out what they're about and, what their take on reality is. But you must always, in my opinion, keep your own sort of intellect alive and be as independent as you can, and then not all just get boxed or caged into one sort of think, that happens, which is often what people do. And just to keep on searching, keep on asking questions. Every book I've written, everything that I've done has been basically born out of X factors, which means that when I would read literature or read, books on whatever subject, say for instance it was on Masonry or Rosicrucianism or bloodline or the movement of the races, or even Irish history for that matter, or even American history for that matter, I would see things that just didn't make sense. You read 2-3 books and one guy's contradicting the other guy, and my mind sort of focuses in on that. So even from the earliest days, even though I read a lot of what friends of mine were reading, I would see things, that didn't make sense. This is certainly the case even for my studies in astrology and things like that. And I couldn't sort of shrug that off, I would like to find out, why is this guy contradicting this, or why doesn't he explain this correctly, or why are there so many different interpretations of just one thing? And of course, people who now, since 9/11, who are doing this kind of research, they're probably going through exactly the same experience, in the sense that there's so much out there, there's so much information, they're noticing these contradictions, and they're noticing also a lot of bias and prejudice from certain groups who think, yeah, we got it down, we're territorializing this, come to us, we got the truth. This is probably happening now on a much vaster scale, but it certainly was going on for me. And so my journey was to kind of correct, or at least to find the answers to these really problematic questions. It's almost somewhat like a detective, who maybe his colleagues are convinced that this one criminal, is guilty, but then you got to sort of rethink it and go, man, that's not, the case isn't quite as tight as you'd like it, and there's certain inconsistencies, and then you got to sort of follow up on that and look into those inconsistencies, and suddenly a new picture emerges, So my work was started in Ireland, but it very quickly branched out to look at other things in the broader picture, because I knew that what I was being basically told about Irish history and what we were taught in school, and even, as I say, what a lot of these colleagues of mine and family members were into, and it just didn't have the ring of truth. So my journey then took me, up until today, of course. But there's so many threads. I also had a very big interest in symbolism, and that was what I thought at the time was a separate study. I just thought it was a personal interest of mine. Why subliminal, content can be found in advertisements and all of these things, and I didn't realize that was going to lead me, where it did, to discover how prevalent that is and how there is this whole sort of war on consciousness, this whole sort of psychic attack on people's consciousness through the media. That this is where it would lead me in the end, but I didn't realize it at the time.
Well, for the listeners that aren't familiar, can you tell us a little bit about what you've touched upon?
Well, a lot to do with symbolism, because I believe that the Big Brother, if you want to call that, or the establishment figures, they've left a big loophole there. They know a lot about our psyche. They're master psychologists, and they've been advised by very powerful, philosopher types who are more shadowy.
Well,
In your latest documentary, Architects of Control, you talk about that a lot, don't you? The anatomy of the consciousness and how they manipulate it. Can you elaborate for our listeners a little bit on that?
Yeah, that's why we do that, is because, first of all, it's kind of, for obvious reasons, it's difficult to convince the average person, you see, that there is some sort of, hidden elect or hidden hand at work. But when you study the symbolism and show the patterns within it, and that they're using the similar symbols all the time, and these are partly astrological, they're partly occult, whatever, it's a really good way to not only convince yourself that something's going on, it's really good to convince other people that something weird is going on. So that's always been a huge focus of mine. And also is because it's not that symbols are negative, it's just that there is this kind of communication going on to the right brain, or even to the limbic centers of the brain. A lot of people just think in normal terms of communication by words, but there's a whole other communication which is vastly important, involving color, and involving number, and even involving rhythm and music, and certainly involving power symbols that come out of the ancient world. This is humongously important because, we have it not just on the dollar bill or on the money, the currency of every single country. Just studying that is interesting, but we now, as people are becoming aware of, it's in the architecture. It's literally in the stonework. And now, of course, we even have big blockbuster movies dealing with this, but this was my interest back in 1982, 83, going around Ireland in a really humble way in the cities there and discovering how incredible this is, and not having, as I say, the answers, but certainly having the right questions, because once you start, isn't there an old statement that says if you think you know the answer, you won't ask the question? So most of my life has just simply been trying to ask the right questions, and then finding out that very few people can answer them, and then realizing, I'm not going to give up. I'm not just going to fall back into consensus trance. It's extremely important to continue the job of asking the right questions and following bravely wherever that particular path will take you. And that means, getting a lot of out-of-print books and reference works that are not available, and sort of following the rabbit hole wherever it leads, and putting basically what it is, it's very eclectic, because you have to take things that on the surface or on paper look very different, like subjects that academia won't touch, or in academia you're not allowed to fuse things together, but bringing it all together, the astrology, the physics, the biology, the astronomy, the psychology, the philosophy, and bringing in your own mind all of this material together in a syncretic way actually gives you the bigger answers about what's really been going on in the world. So that's sort of what I was doing, and it paid off because people started to say, that's great. You've explained things in ways that we've had these questions ourselves, but we didn't think it could be resolved in this way. And because I don't have a degree and I am not affiliated, with any university or college, I don't have the consensus thought. I don't have to, worry about my position or anything like that. It gives you that freedom to study subjects that are completely dissimilar on paper. This, I think, is a huge part of what I do. And the DVD, as you said, that we made was an attempt to sort of, again, do that, is to show how that the establishment is like a hydra. It's many heads. It's many tentacles. It's not just one simple, approach. And nor is the solution then one simple approach. It's not just, let's just come back to God, and sort of believe in Jesus again and wave a magic wand and the whole world will, everything will be perfect again. Again, the answers and the solutions are also not to be found in just one simple area. And that can be really challenging for people because it demands a lot of work and it demands a new way of looking at the world. That's what my job is really all about, is to try and open the eyes of the world, not to threaten anybody or say that, particular people have to suddenly leave, what they are familiar with, but it's also to try and adjust the settings a bit and see this matter for what it is. It's occult, it's hidden, and that requires a different kind of focus than most people are used to.
Michael, I know you talk a lot about mind control on the new DVD, and I got to say, congratulations on that, because the production quality and the flow of information is just absolutely top-notch there. Very well-written cinematic effects and everything. Can you tell us a little bit about mind control? Can you go into that briefly?
Well, one thing that can be said is how incredibly old that is, that process. What we really wanted to get across, and of course we gave some, modern sort of examples and what have you, serial killers, and I've been following this stuff for years, in the sense that I've always thought there's something kind of bizarre about the rise of even what we would call mass murder or serial crimes, and of course it takes many other forms, even certain high-level politicians. There's evidence that mind control is being used, very, very powerful versions of that. But also what we wanted to do is show how subtle it is, that basically everything in our world is mind control. The very image you may even have of yourself could be secondhand. We all have to conform to our parents. For example, their image of us, is highly involved in how the parents and their neuroses and all the things that they want for us, and how, it's like, it really is as primitive as the boys being given guns, and the girls being given dolls or whatever, every single thing that we have is to erase our own sense of identity. So we're already coming into the world with the natural flow of our natural intelligence being blocked. And therefore, whatever that person then gets into later on in life, be it a path, a religion, a political belief system, whatever, you're already dealing with something that's completely secondhand. It's made to order. And these are psychic cages. They're what the poet William Blake referred to as mind-forged manacles. And what they do is they put the soul to sleep. They put the critical ability and what he referred to as imagination, and he didn't really mean that word in the way we use it today. He was talking about the soul. He just used the word imagination for a man's own individual soul, not a religious soul, not a collective soul, but man's own flow of intelligence. That is blocked.
Kind of like putting a cork in it.
Yeah. They put a cork in it like from day one. And therefore our entire relationship to the world, to sexuality, to members of the opposite sex, to our selfhood, to how the system operates, to how government operates, to our vision of foreigners, our vision of even our own culture. Everything is skewed, everything is distorted. I've gone into this not only in the DVD, but in the article that I wrote called Weapons of Mass Destruction Found. It's a huge problem. And therefore, the mind control can be auto-control. There's a certain external version, and then there's the way that people themselves blinker themselves, how they are afraid of reality. In fact, there's even a thesis. It's very much something I believe. And of course, you can only pose it as a question because I'm not enforcing my beliefs on anybody, but I would always ask people the question, what if it turns out to be, at the end of the day, that the reason why the whole world is the way it is because man is actually the last thing he wants in the world is true freedom. We have to take that on board. We can't just summarily and flippantly go, oh, well, we're all seeking for freedom. Liberty, rights, equality, fraternity. This is all on paper, yeah. But when you start looking at things psychologically, does it really look to us? I mean, just head down to the local mall, go down to the Sharks arena or whatever. Just turn on the TV. Does it really look to you that anybody, the priority in their lives is true freedom or justice? I don't think so. So then we got to ask the question, why is that? Why do people vote the tyrants in? Why is it even when those tyrants go on and do things, and of course we're talking current right now, it's happening right in our face right now, why is it that when these politicians do breach their own promises, that then we think, oh, politics can't be rolled back, we can't turn it around, it just has to happen, okay, we were wrong for voting it in, but now we just got to continue. Why is that? Why do we think like that?
Do you think maybe it's because people don't want to accept the responsibility that comes with being truly free?
100%. In fact, what you've just said there is actually being the thesis of some of the top psychologists, the big brass, the Erich Fromms, the Viktor Frankls, the Sigmund Freuds. Sigmund Freud spoke heavily about the fact that civilization was pretty much doomed. He said we need it, but there are certain tremendous problems. Nietzsche said it, and Erich Fromm said that he even wrote a book called Escape from Freedom. And basically saying that if you gave man, if the wind was to throw open the cell door to true freedom, man would be scurrying and hiding under the bed. He doesn't want
too scary for him.
It's too scary. It's too scary. And of course that can be understood because again it ties into Chris's question about the mind control. It is partly conditioning. I think, don't get me wrong, I do believe there's an impulse within the deepest part of everyone that definitely wants to individuate and definitely wants to differentiate and definitely wants to have that free expression. But after centuries and centuries and centuries, after all, we know where I'm talking right because the feminists agree that the behavior of women, for instance, is entirely based on their age-long suppression. So if even a simple, the philosophy of feminism can clinically and clearly and biologically and sociologically prove that the behavior of a certain species or behavior of a certain gender is because of years and years of oppression, well then my point is then taken that all mankind has continually been through aversion therapy, through reinforcements, negative reinforcements, through the church, through religion, through this whole double-headed eagle apparatus, has been taught to associate freedom with pain. This is basically what's happened. And we see it on the smaller scale. but we don't realize that it's happened in our habitat. It's happened to our forefathers. It's happened to us. In fact, it's so ubiquitous we don't even notice it anymore. But that still doesn't mean that the question of freedom is negated, because absolutely every age is going to be looming on the path ahead of us. It's always going to be there, whether people want freedom and whether they don't. What's happening now is there's a massive tension in people. And that tension can sort of be an awakening, or at least it's like when you're trying to strike a light. The light may not have come on yet, the match may not have completely flared up, but you do have these interesting sparks. And that's what's happening now. People have been shaken up. They're not necessarily awakened up. But then Big Brother gets really, really afraid of that, because they are incredibly afraid. Because they know that if this instance, in this particular period of history, because we have the certain media we do, we have the certain brain power we do, we have the information we do, they know that if, for instance, there was a true massive awakening, that wet match suddenly flared up and they were overthrown, they never could rise again. No tyranny would ever be able to rise ever in the history of mankind. So they're very afraid.
Well, Zbigniew Brzezinski recently said there's a massive global political awakening. Do you think that this is a false awakening, or are the elite really scared of the consciousness of man?
It's both. It's easy to be. It partly is false, because again, if you're trying to accomplish it politically, then it's going to go nowhere. But at the same time, it could be that it is a legitimate thing, that there is something happening. I mean, see, if you look at this thing astrologically, then it's legitimate. If you look at the astrological data, then it does look legitimate. The presence of the three major planets, Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune, and they all work together. They're like three brothers, or sisters. They work together, and those are definitely about shrugging off the old Saturnian paradigms, which is what's happening now. Saturn, Mars, the Sun, Jupiter, Venus, Mercury, these rule society as we know it. They're established, they're patriarchal, they're creative in a small c. And the Plutonic, Neptunian, Uranian is more deconstructive. It's to free up things. It's to open up the walnut and say, what, is this rotten in here? What the hell do we need it for? Throw it away. Let's reinvent something and build it up again. Now, the Saturnian chiefs have always known that this time would come. They're very into astrology for a start. They knew this time would come. So what they're making use of, they can't stop the change any more than King Canute sitting on the beach could stop the waves. They know they can't stop it. But what they can do is make good use of the in-between time. Because in life, and even in healing, you are simply not a person. It never happens that suddenly you have white and then you have black. You have ill health and then suddenly you're healthy. It doesn't happen like that. There's a gray area in between, and that's what the Big Brother is hoping for. That because once an age-old system or status quo passes away, the other one doesn't just click in immediately. It just doesn't happen like that in life. There's a big wasteland, sort of gray area there, and they're hoping that people will be so vulnerable, so scared, so frightened, so alienated, so paranoid, which is what's happening now. This is how I interpret a lot of things that's happening now. They may either turn back and rush to the city walls going, let me back in again. Please give me, the cage, which we've already mentioned. Or they might just sort of, become completely neurotic, in which they can be swept up by Big Brother and then introduced to, the sort of global village situation that's coming. But an earlier point I wanted to make is this. There's also a good side of this. As the threat of a real awakening happens to these Brzezinskis and even the people that control them, they hurry to build the new technological trap. What does any detective know happens when the criminal hurries?
He makes mistakes.
Yes, he makes mistakes. So in a way, to answer your question, there could be a positive aspect of this, because even though some of the inclination to awaken could literally be just in itself a paranoia, not really a legitimate seeking for wisdom, but because, we just kind of pissed off with the previous system, can we have something new now? It's really immaterial. What's really to be watched out for is as Big Brother has to hustle more, because as I said, if a real awakening was to come now, he's finished. They're kaput. They're a small group anyway, and they could be kaput. And they also have to factor this in. So they hurry. And like any criminal, when they hurry, they leave more tracks for the hunter. They leave themselves open more. And I believe, in fact, that Big Brother has a devil of a time right now dealing with his own house, from keeping people within their own coterie from either turning coat, blowing the whistle, or just making stupid faux pas. You see, this is happening all the time now. They have enough to hold their own dike together than run around worrying about the Alex Joneses and who's doing what. That's a concern, but believe me, they've got a lot of problems on their own plate right now, not also tied into the changes of awakening that are taking place. But again, to come back to the point, Man for centuries has been waiting for these tigers to lead him out of the long grass, meaning lead him out of the jungle. So he's conditioned by them. He's learned to trust these tyrants. As these tyrants keep going round and round, people will eventually go, hey, haven't we passed this store before? I mean, I recognize those trees. Are we just going round and round and round? Are you really leading us towards progress? Because I think we're just going round and round and round. When they realize that these so-called leaders are just misleaders, that's one big thing, and that's happening. They're realizing that the politicians and the royal families, they're hopeless. They're sending us out to wars. They're even scaling back on the things that they once even gave us, That's all positive. But the dark side is, although Big Brother cannot stop the new epoch from coming in, he can make use of this gray area, for want of a word, or this wasteland area where people are not adjusted to, a system they've been so used to is fading away. And therefore, there's a big sort of cold turkey period, at that point, and that's where there's a certain danger, and that's the place we're in right now.
Well, do you feel like they're counting down to 2012? And if that's the case, why?
Oh, definitely. That's no doubt about that at all. And not just to 2012, but the whole cycle. I've always said it's not just about the date itself. That is a marker, a milestone. There's been several others in the last 10 years, and if you really want the truth of it, for the last 20, 30 years. In fact, one might even say from the discovery of the planet Pluto. Depending on what school you're coming from, there's people who can say, oh, no, wait a minute, it was 1888, there's a big thing there. There's been various celestial alignments, blah, blah, blah. That's all debatable. But strictly from the Maya prophecy, just the very fact that we entered into this, we're entering into the sixth world, and we went through this fifth world period, which is a sort of hiatus period, which they refer to as the age of awakening or the age of revealing. That alone is in itself a countdown. I do believe that something very weird is likely to happen around about 2012. It could be some sort of whistleblowing thing where instead of a bunch of, people like us from the outside with a bullhorn trying to waken up the world, what would happen, for instance, if it was actually a total insider who's just had enough? Putin, the president of Pakistan, a general, a major person from the Vatican, that kind of level. We can't rule it out. What would happen? Because it's a strange quirk of human nature that what they won't believe, you see, from some rebel in the streets, they will believe if it's somebody coming out on the balcony and saying, I can prove it. Haven't we had an insight in that within the last 2 weeks with the emails of this ClimateGate crowd? Remember that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We need those inside men coming out because then they can't deny the information. The general public can't say, oh, this is a conspiracy.
That's what I mean. Because then you will not have your buddies at the pub and your buddies at work crossing their arms when you talk about conspiracy going, oh, do us a favor. Because when it comes from the inside, then they have to put a cork in it. Now you can stare them right in the eye and go, excuse me? What are you talking about? Here it is in black and white. Actually, it's already happened, but I'm thinking that in 2012, it'll be so massive. You'll have some real insiders just saying, I've had enough, and they'll come out from, the glass ceiling from that.
Like a Build-A-Burger.
I think so. This is one thing that could happen because it's the age of revealing, the age of awakening. And remember, the person who does it might just be doing it because they have a private peeve. I'm not going to say they're champions of humanity or anything like that. It won't matter. It'll be immaterial. The fact is that documents will be leaked. Listen, don't these people, let's look at it this way. Don't these people just adore a surveillance society?
They love it.
Well, listen, it could backfire in their face. What happens if a major bishop or cardinal from the Club of Rome is sitting there talking about world control, or Prince William with a few too many drinks in him one night down in London in a pub, and one of his mates is recording him as he's talking about what his family have done for the world and how they've kept everybody in line and how many peoples they've massacred and other secrets, you see, and how the real system, they own this and they own that. And then it's all on tape, and the next morning he finds it's all over YouTube. Yeah,
I can just imagine Nick Rockefeller sitting back after having a few Mai Tais or whatever and just letting it go, And
this is it.
Yeah. Something like that.
And I think this is what has happened, because something, if you really do read the sages, the real masters, they've always predicted that the destruction comes from within. They never say that you can bash the doors from the outside. To really bring down the ivory tower. The ivory tower always is destroyed from within. It's a principle. It's actually a mystical principle. And by the way, it's also an astrological principle, because the planet Pluto, if you really read into what the planet Pluto is all about, it is about the essence of something. Even the word Pluto represents the plutonic level. It's the atomic level. It's from within. Pluto is the planet archetype that says, what is this thing made of? I'm going to inspect it with a fine-tooth comb, and if I find a single crack, then this thing is falling down. Well, single crack. The Saturnian ivory tower has got lots of cracks in it. It was founded on total corruption to begin with. So when Pluto comes in, you see, and it shakes it, it's like a rotten tooth. It's going to yank it out. In fact, if you go to the card in the tarot that's ruled by Pluto, it's called the Death card, number 13. Just objectively, people can go online and look at it. You'll see that Death is on a steed. He's on a white horse, and the horse is riding over the corpses of a pope, and a king.
So it's an unstoppable force.
That's what I mean. Nothing can stand in the weight of the Plutonic energy because none of the Saturnian or even the solar energies, to use astrological phraseology here, can stand against that agent of justice. And that is what is happening now. These systems are unsustainable. Their time has come to pass away. People can be moving around the furniture on the Titanic if they feel like it, but the object, it's not going to stop anything. You'll just have a more comfortable collision with the iceberg when it comes. Because this is the way things are moving. These individuals who I'm talking about, the Saturnian people, have lived in denial of nature's ordinances for thousands of years. Their very cities are designed that way. Their infrastructure is designed that way. Their mentality is like that. It's anti-natural, anti-organic. And therefore, within that evil, that's what a definition of evil is. But within the seed of evil within evil is the seed of its own destruction. So again, it's more of an internalized thing. So then translated into physical life, that could be that somebody from within, not just a faker, periodically you get guys coming out saying that they're from the inside and it's totally bogus, but I mean a really big person who's got the goods, he's got the information, and he even knows how to get it broadcast. And it could be something along those lines. But I wouldn't say that would be the only thing. But it's certainly something to look out for.
Well, we're already seeing that with the Climate Gate coming out and other things like that, and I'd like to touch upon that a little bit later in the interview. But I wanted to ask you about the pharmaceutical companies and what is their role in all of this? I assume they play a big key part.
Oh, absolutely. They've been operating for centuries. Because remember, as we talked about that wasteland period?
Oh, yeah.
When awakened people... And I mean even people who are in desperation. See, desperation is actually a very good thing. We've been told such a pack of lies about the so-called darker emotions. But desperation is very akin to inspiration. In fact, the study of the life of an artist or a musician, and you'll find they're identical. But people who don't understand that, who have to leave what David Icke calls, the square.
The square of the known.
Yeah. They have to leave the cubicle and they branch outside and they have a lot of resistance from people. It's at that point that the person's mind becomes quite neurotic. Because, you may know what you want to leave, but you don't exactly know the way to what you want to attain, which is in the Vedic traditions called your dharma. So in other words, you may have identified your karma, and you may want to escape from it. Karma is nothing more than ignorance. But you may not yet be able to, find the citadel, your dharma. It's at that point then that a person becomes sort of, they get... neurotic patterns, they may feel desperate and isolated and lonely. They may eat too much. They may start to feel insomniac and all of this kind of thing. And it's at that point that the people turn towards these pharmaceuticals. And, of course, they're ready there. Even I've gone into the symbolism of a lot of the names that are used for these products. And they're terribly dangerous, of course. They're deadly. And this particular kind of attack on the human race has been happening for many, many centuries. William Bramley even talked about it in his Gods of Eden. But even if you scroll forward to the end of the First and Second World War, you'll find that there was a thing called the Spanish flu, which wiped out just as many people as fought in the First World War. You have, various plagues breaking out, very bizarre, and then nothing in their like. Then you have the AIDS. I mean, anyone who's done even 5 minutes of homework knows that was completely by design. That was a totally manufactured pandemic. And we're going to have others. Connecting then to people's addictions, both to pharmaceutical type drugs and then more illicit drugs. We have the whole methamphetamine thing going on, you see. This is all the desperation that's misinterpreted. People don't realize that the pain that arises from your desperation and for your angst is a good thing. You actually need to work with it. You need to love it. Carl Jung said that the secret of all neurosis is the avoidance of legitimate suffering. And even people like George Carlin have said it even in a more humorous way. But they're all right. We have been told such a pack of lies. We've been given this illusion, you see, of this one-seasoned Bahamas beach-type world, where everything's just wonderful, and where's my surfboard? that people have even lost in contact with what is legitimate suffering. Even to say that, it sounds like, oh my God, Michael, you're so pessimistic and dark. They've cut themselves off from a natural psychological thing. When there's something wrong in your life, when there's pain, injustice, and corruption, you should feel not good about it. There should be angst. There should be a problem. There shouldn't be that Folger's smile, this smiling depressives that we got walking around. You shouldn't run into inauthentic models. You should feel bad about it. But people today have another form of conditioning. And we can say, okay, it's this group or that group that started this or whatever. But again, people have not able to sit there with their pain. They want to dull it. And there's a whole Leviathan out there to help them do that.
So they run off to the doctors, and, you call them the men in white.
Yeah.
Are they just our modern version of priests, and are the psychopharmaceuticals just the modern sacrament then?
That's a great way of putting it. And do you know even the logos that they use have this elixir-type symbolism involved? Not only the people who are dealing with the genetics right now, but a lot of these pharmaceuticals, they even use symbolism. AZT is a good example. AZT is a term that's extremely ancient. It actually comes from the world of alchemy, and vowels, consonants were used in a certain occult way. AZT is the name, the code name in alchemy of mercury, the substance mercury, which was always considered identical to the spiritual or alchemical elixir, which is considered the cure-all. And it's also the enlightener. So, and the symbol of AZT or Azoth was an egg with a serpent around it. So very similar to the symbols and logos that you find on the medical corporations. So AZT is a subconscious thing. By thinking people who've got a disease or think they've got a disease, then they offer you the bromide, they offer you the heal-all, and they put on that a very powerfully spiritual, meaning of elixir, and then people go for it. So they're motivated psychologically. They're also given even a false idea. Most people are given a false idea of what healing is and what disease is in the first place.
So these symbols that they use, are you basically describing sigils that they're using for branding and things like that? The alchemist sigils, the magician's spell?
Yeah, they are. That sigil is a combination between, I guess it would be an actual symbol and perhaps letters. Like, say, for instance, the Ogham, the Irish Ogham, or sigils, the runes, or sigils. There's even a whole study of, even the astrological signs, or for that matter, the alchemical signs. These are all sigils, and they're turning up over and over again on these very, very products. And not only that, but the advertisements that sell the products are loaded. I have examples in the DVDs on symbolism that show exactly what it means so that people can back this up, The red rose that was constantly being used for the Prozac. The heart shape even, which is really two serpents coming together. The chalice and the serpent, which is used by many genome companies and corporations. This is, again, as I say, a loophole for people to study to realize that it is occult. It goes on and on. It's a very big thing. I've done extensive work on that and will be continuing to do work on this.
And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a quick break. We are speaking with Michael Tsarion. That is michaeltsarion.com, and his new DVD is Architects of Control at architectsofcontrol.com. Rather than going into a song, we're going to go ahead and go into a clip from his new DVD, and we'll be right back.
So it says here, there's an interesting caption that says, "Here stands the new man. His conception of reality is a dance of electronic images fired into his forebrain, a gossamer construction of his masters designed so that he will not under any circumstances perceive the actual or the real. His happiness is delivered to him through a tube or an electronic connection. His God lurks behind an electronic curtain, and when the curtain is pulled away, we find the CIA sorcerer and the media manipulator." Jim Keith, Mind Control, Mass Control, just one of the fine books on the manipulation of consciousness that he did before he sadly basically was killed. He was one of the people, I think, one of few who understood that the real war is a war on consciousness. It's very important to always remember that it may have so many other permutations. Now we're seeing it's mass killings in America or what have you. But, and then all heads turn, as soon as that comes on the little media framed image, then people are shocked, and they turn to that as if it's some sort of freak phenomena or something like that. It's actually, the sad case is it's not freak. And anyone who's really studied mind control understands that mind control is ubiquitous. It's almost the question of who is not mind controlled, as opposed to, who is mind controlled. It's just a difference in degree. whole question of what is consciousness and how it can be manipulated is one of the most crucial questions of our time.
And welcome back to Truth Frequency. I am your host, Chris Gio, and I'm joined as always by the lovely socio student. We are speaking with Michael Tsarion. You can find his work at michaeltsarion.com, and his new DVD is out, Architects of Control, and that's available at architectsofcontrol.com. Now, Michael, we were talking about symbolism and the use of sigils in advertisement, basically these spells that are used to hypnotize and mass mind control the populations. You also mentioned talismanic words. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how they use it and what their powers are?
Well, talismanic words are those that have this particular power, like the AZT. The AZT is a talismanic word. AIDS is, by the way. The letter H was always silent up until very recent times, and still is. Sometimes we don't even pronounce it. Like the word honest, for instance, right, has an H in front of it, but you barely hear it. Well, that's why the word, if you put the H back onto the word AIDS, it becomes Hades or Hades. Yeah. And this opens a whole ball of wax into what that really means. Hades is a god. Hades is a god that
of the underworld.
Of the underworld. And that's where people go when they get these diseases. They're literally going on a journey into the underworld, except they're not doing it willingly. There's a whole occult symbol here of a man being given a disease, and this is he's not part of a ritual, even though he doesn't know it. He's part of some weird Cagliostro, rite is actually what's going on. And the men in white appear, because they're all Templars and Templar-based. Just the very fact of why a hospital is called a hospital, or a hotel, or a hostel. Those are words coming of a knightly order called the Knights of St. John Hospitallers, because they were the ones who were doing this in the 1300s. In various hospitals, even, we all know about the Red Cross being a symbol, and that's the Swiss version. Switzerland is controlled 100% by the Knights Templar. But even before they used the Red Cross, they used a black cross. It's called a Pate cross, the black cross. You find it on even church. You find it on medical institutions like the St. Mary's up in Seattle and other places. Still, they're using the black cross as a symbol of the medicos. Medici. Where do you think that word comes from? The Medicis of Italy is nothing more than the medics, the medicos, the medics, because these people were pharmaceutical people. They were apothecaries. They were druggists, and they knew the secret of plants, flora and fauna. Just in the same way that to make perfume, you've got to abstract it from living animals. Well, these guys knew incredible amount about serpents and resins, you see, and ointments and rare spices. Incredible how this story goes. And many of the symbols of the Medici family are actually to be found still involved in the corporations of America. You'll still find the same symbols. And as a matter of fact, if people really want the details, the venture capitalists that funded, for instance, not just many corporations, but the entire Silicon Valley experiment. I mean, the whole thing of personal computers was funded, and I mean Sun Corporation, Microsoft, MIT, all of the technical orgs that you can possibly think of are funded by British and European venture capitalists that used to have their headquarters in New York through the 50s, 60s, and 70s. But then in the mid-70s, they moved en masse to Menlo Park, right in the center of where the boom would happen. The whole Bill Gates, Bill Joy and Steve Jobs cult would begin. Well, just prior to that, these venture capitalists opened offices in mass in Menlo Park. And their money, you can't audit these people. They don't even tell you where the money comes from. The money for these corporate and technical ventures, as I said, came out of these venture capitalists who themselves draw upon money that is given by these very royal families of Europe. So European dynasties like the Medicis and their descendants, the Habsburgs, the Saxe-Coburg-Gothas, the Savoy families and the Windsor families, they pool their money through their agents that appear to just be normal venture capitalists, wealthy guys you see who want to help entrepreneurs and what have you. But then what they do is when they actually own that company, the symbolism that they use for that corporation tells you the whole story. You can't rely on that alone, of course, that's not what I'm saying, but the symbolism will give you a big window, a keyhole into really who runs the shop. And so the study of symbolism in an American context is extremely important because it leads back to Europe and even to, the East into Egypt and so forth and so on.
So there's quite a bit of history here. Do the Rockefellers or the Rothschilds tie into these ancient bloodlines?
Yes, but the thing that needs to be understood is that they're still low level. One of the big peeves that I had, remember in the beginning you were asking questions about my particular slant on things?
Yes.
One of it involves inverting what we know about the Rothschild dynasty. All history claims that the Rothschilds are the prime movers, and that they've even, Amschel Rothschild, the first one in the family, was an expert manipulator of this idiot, the Prince of Hesse, and he invested his money for him, and these doting, idiotic princes, just hadn't got a clue, and Lord Rothschild was the cunning, Svengali who made it all happen and built up his family's reputation, blah, blah, blah. And you get this all the time in the official and unofficial biographies. And nothing could be further from the truth. The Rothschilds themselves are agents of the crown. The evidence is there, it's in my books, and it's absolutely no doubt about it. It's preposterous to imagine that some little Jewish family from a ghetto in Frankfurt on Main could suddenly be just entering into the houses of the royals in the land of Hesse, which is in Germany, and so forth.
And Lombardy.
And Lombardy and these places, and just through selling a few coins, suddenly gain this amount of literally physical power that he was given. It's total nonsense, and anyone who believes that has not done enough homework. Their insignias tell you this. Their history tells you this. The fact that all the brothers, the early brothers of the Rothschilds, were Knights of Malta, which you can't get unless you're initiated by the various potentates, the royals. The fact that they're the keepers of the treasury for the Vatican. You see, they didn't enter. How can Jews over here who always traditionally on surface are being blamed for the execution of Jesus, right? Traditionally, Catholics meant to despise Jews because they blame them for crucifying Jesus. But then you find over here in the economic world, they work hand in hand together. That's one of these inconsistencies, you see, that we were talking about earlier, that I just couldn't. I wouldn't accept what the normal books were saying. The idea of the rise of the Rothschilds was absolutely unacceptable to me. Maybe it's because I know more about British and European history than most American writers. I don't know what it is, but it didn't smell right. And there's many other things along those lines just like this.
So they're not the ones at the top. They're basically just right at the bottom serving.
Yeah. They are servants of the crown. They're literally telling you that. The very coat of arms of the Rothschild dynasty is very, very similar to the actual coat of arms of the Queen of England herself. I've got the pictures on my Irish Origins website. If they go into the excerpts link and click on chapter 42, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So these are, of course, put in front of you as the main prime movers. There's many reasons why they want to do that. It's because there's very few royal power figures in the world, and they need ants. Right? The queen bee sits in the hive, but they need the worker ants to do the job. Well, the worker ants are these massively powerful Judite families and many others. There's even the Muslim Brotherhood is tied into this, because the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood is actually not what people think. The Muslim Brotherhood is a Kabbalistic Judite order that's hiding behind the veil of Islam in the same way that many of these people have hidden behind the veil of evangelism and Christianity and even atheism and all of these different groups.
Well, Mike, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to ask you about the Islamic warriors and their connection to the Freemasonry. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. If people really want to know the details, because I'm actually not the expert on it, it's just something I've researched. If they go to my forum, the MSAR forum, which you can get to through michaeltsarion.com, go to the War on You page, especially the ones of the last 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, and the whole story is laid out there. But basically, yes, in short, by the way, the expert on this is a man called David Livingstone, who wrote a book called Terror and the Illuminati. I've got all the links there for that, and people can go to Terror stroke Illuminati, to David Livingstone's work. The point is that he understands what my researchers also understood. I call them Atenists. He calls them Frankists, coming out of Armenia. It's really the same. They're the same coterie. That there was a very powerful group of sorcerers. These are the same people that we were talking about who really are behind the medical profession, because the Bayer Corporation, Bayer, for instance, is really Bauer. And Bauer is the wife of Lord Rothschild. The original Rothschild was called Amschel Rothschild, but their family name is Bauer. And they're the ones who are behind the Bayer Corporation. They just changed the names a little bit so you don't realize it. And their neighbors, other relations to them, was the Oppenheimer people, who are the Oppenheimer Trust, or even the famous scientist, Robert Oppenheimer. And so we need to know about these families and study them up and find out. That doesn't mean that everybody who's called that has got some agenda, but there's this core group, you see, that works out of Europe, and they have a lot of power.
Okay, but just for the audience, can you explain why we're not talking about Middle Eastern Islam?
Well, the Muslim Brotherhood is, in fact, Judite. And Jews need to know about this, because I'm not saying they're Jewish. There's a big difference between what is known as a Judite Kabbalistic, Talmudic, Atonist, Judite than there is about a Torah-worshipping Jew. There's a completely two different things, and Jews are finally at last starting to wake up to this. Basically, it's the difference between Zionism and Judaism. There's two big differences there. In fact, I would ask people a question. Why is it that one of the cities of Switzerland is called Tsarion, S-I-O-N? People need to realize that word has nothing to do with Judaism as we know it. It's a secret society, talismanic word, so to speak, that represents the Knights of the Knights Templar. And these proto-Judites, when they were thrown out of Egypt, they had to move. They're basically connected to the Merovingians, the Carolingians, these dark brotherhoods, the Dragon Court. They went to a city, they went to many cities, but they went to one, Odessa, for instance, is one of their headquarters, which used to be called Samara. And Samara means city of the lizards. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
I didn't know that either.
Wow.
It's very important today to know about Odessa.
Well, that's around the Black Sea, correct?
It's technically it's in the Black Sea. Odessa is today where the so-called Russian mafia, which is really a Jewish mafia, is coming from. Odessa has been the center of white slavery, prostitution, opium dealing, all sorts of weird satanic stuff for centuries. Anyone who's studied the history of secret societies knows that Odessa plays a big part in this. One could do a whole show on just that. It used to be called Samara, and that word, in the language of the time, it means city of the serpents or city of the lizards. So this old dragon brotherhood you see setting up there again and running all sorts of evil things. Then you have the rise of the Ottoman Empire. Nobody can understand the history of the world. Nobody can understand the rise of the most powerful Jewish families like the Sassoons, the Warburgs, and the Rothschilds without understanding about the Ottoman Empire, which was on the surface was a Turkish and therefore Islamic, empire that stretched all over the world at one point. It was extremely brutal. But as all empires become decadent, and as I said before, the cultured leaders of these empires, they just want to sit around in their harem and enjoy artwork and all this. They're not really that interested in running, the shop, so to speak. So it's at this point that there was many conversions, and David Livingstone tells you how this conversion was happening. And under the guise of Islam, these Frankists, these Judites, converted. Some people believe they had to because they were being threatened. They were impinged themselves on both sides, and they had to make a decision. That's one historical theory. And there's other theories as well. They're the proverbial wolf in sheep's clothing. We know that it's happened in the West, but we don't understand how it happened in the East. The whole Eastern story of the secret societies, it has not been told. I'm glad to see that it is starting to be told now because it's an extremely important part of this. That ties in the Khazars, you see, of the Black Sea area. That ties in the Armenians and the massive genocide that took place to the Armenians and what that word Armen means, where it comes from. Very important aspect there. So basically, to cut a long story short, there was an infiltration of the Islamic movement by these people who meant Islam no good, and certainly meant nobody else any good. They were protecting themselves and gaining power over the years. And then as the Ottoman Empire started to crumble, and it actually started to crumble because of the work of these infiltrators, these fifth columnists were the ones bringing the very Ottoman Empire to its knees. They started to then sign alliances with the British government. Is that where the East India Trading Company stuff came in? That's not connected yet.
Oh, okay.
But this small coterie became what is known as the Young Turks. We have the links on the War on You page, as I said, but people can just go in and look at Young Turks. Macy's Corporation, for instance, has its roots in the Young Turks because they won, you see. The whole story of this is that they won. These infiltrators I'm talking about, when the German War was on, when the First World War was being fought, Germany, of course, lost.
Right.
And because these individuals were working for Winston Churchill, they weren't originally. They were working for Hitler. Oh, it's not Hitler. What am I talking about? They were fighting for Germany in the beginning, but Winston Churchill knew that the young, impressionable, ultra-Turkish, and he knew who they really were. He knew that they were Jews. He sent waves and waves of agents, very sophisticated, powerful agents, into Turkey, into Constantinople, to win them over. And he did this through the guise of the Masonic Lodge. Many of these Turks belonged to Islamic Masonry, Masonic organizations in Constantinople, where there was enormous Masonry. And this ties back into why in Freemasonry today, if you even study basically their logos and their degrees, you'll find that one of the highest degrees in Freemasonry is called the Shriners. Again, go online and
Right.
Yeah, and they use the fez and the scimitar, the sword,
Right.
the Turkish sword and the star and the symbols of Venus and all this. That's in Masonry, for goodness sake, and it's extremely high level. And then you have a real shocker when you find out just how many leaders of the corporations of America were themselves Shriners.
Wow.
See, so then you have a big quandary, which is the quandary that I had when I started researching this. Is, how the hell, how can you understand that the top leaders of, and these are white Gentile guys on the surface, but then they have these Shriner degrees? What's going on there? It's the same problem that J. Edward Griffin and Eustace Mullins had when they turned around and found out that the funders of communism are the wealthy capitalists coming out of London and New York. You got a problem, see? So that's what I'm talking about, adjusting the settings. If you go knock on the university door and go, could you please explain that to me? They go away, little boy, we have no answers for you, or just believe what's in the history books. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the millions of dollars that Adolf Hitler, and I'm talking about millions, this little runt is a nobody in what was the Proto-German Workers' Party. I can't remember exactly the name of it, but this little nothing party in Germany that met in a little beer hall down some little alleyway, right? As it went bust, it actually went bankrupt. Hitler was he was almost like the T-boy when he joined this group. 5 minutes after the thing becomes bankrupt, he appears in the same organization with literally with millions of Deutschmarks in gold, and he renames that organization the German Workers' Party, and then finally the N became the Nazi Party. I can't remember the intermediate name of it. How did he do that? Who backed him up? Who gave him the money to do that? You see, so we have these inconsistencies. Who gave him all the uniforms? You had this thing called the Versailles Treaty, in which a German was not even meant to hold a weapon, let alone have uniforms. Where are they getting all that money? Where are they getting all that wealth? And then you find out that it's these rich bankers. The same thing applies. Like I said, we know about it in the West. We're getting a bit of a handle on these sort of conspiracies. But it's extremely important now with the rise of so-called Islam to realize it is not the rise of Islam. It is the rise of a form of Freemasonry that has a long history. And Winston Churchill, had he not gone in and won these people over to his side with huge bonuses, he said, if you help the British and the Americans against Germany, we will make sure that when you win, you will have the reign of Turkey, you will have the reign of Armenia, you will have the reign of Iraq and Iran. We will give you Kuwait, we will give you Saudi Arabia, we will give you whatever you want. And we will also give you top corporations if you want. We'll open the university doors to you. We will give you land and privilege and wealth, and we'll establish banks for you. We'll give you the lot. And the Young Turks turned coat, took the side of the Allies against the Axis powers, you see. And of course, as we know, the Allies won, and therefore the subsequent payoff of these very, very sinister, powerful families who already were already were basically Luciferian. But remember, they were under the Ottoman Empire. They had to stay put. They didn't have quite the world control that they did after the First World War. So the study of these groups, where they came from thousands of years ago, is interesting. But their movement from the period of the destruction of the Ottoman Empire to today is also vitally important, and their role in Freemasonry. It's a tremendous study, a very interesting study. It involves a lot of symbolism, and it certainly involves what's happening today with the rise of these groups and the conflicts, and how easy, just by under the name of religion, of course, how easy it is to stir up these age-old conflicts, this age-old crusader mentality.
Now, Michael, are these two groups constantly struggling with each other? Are there power struggles going on, or have they always been united with their one-world agenda, working together? No,
there's constant power struggles. And this is because they're psychopaths.
That sounds like an ancient Greek, who was it, Plato, Socrates?
Plato and Socrates addressed it in the Republic when they actually analyzed, thieves. They said if a group of thieves exist, because they're all criminals, one is always conspiring the death of the other, you know what I'm saying? And if there's three criminals, what happens if two gang up against the one?
Oh, they're eventually going to go after each other.
Yeah. Right. So there's this weird dynamic that comes with certain criminal institutions. They've tried to set things in place that stop this from happening, but it often doesn't work very well because one is always afraid that two will go gang up against him. So always he wants to gang up with the second guy to annihilate the third. So within a criminal syndicate, you have endless conflicts. You don't have to, be Elliot Ness to work this out, that each mobster can be placed against the other if you're psychologically smart. And even though they've learned that this can be their pitfall, and they've tried to, stop it from happening by control from above. Remember the old James Bond images where they have Spectre, and it's always the head man, and if anybody gets out of line of Spectre, they're always taken care of.
Sit down, number 2.
So, they drop you through a trap door and feed you to the sharks or whatever. But they have enough, as I say, problems handling rogue action within their own coterie. And a lot of history is this, or let me say more specifically, a lot of history is to try and make sure that you don't see that this has happened. So when a particular skirmish or battle, has broken out in the world and it's quite famous historically, they'll tell you, oh, it had to do really with this, it had to do with race, or it had to do with shortage of water, or no, it's oil. When in fact what's happening is these guys are having a pillow fight, beating the shit out of each other because they all want a piece of the pie, you see.
And we're going to take a quick break, ladies and gentlemen. We are speaking with Michael Tsarion. You can find his work at michaeltsarion.com and his new DVD, Architects of Control, which is an excellent, excellent watch. Find that at architectsofcontrol.com. This is Truth Frequency. I am your host, Chris Gio, and joined as always by the lovely socio student. We'll be back in just a few minutes with Michael Tsarion.
Who controls the web? The spider controls the web. And the spider is at a level that you never see. It's not Tony Blair. He's a strand. The Bush family, they're a strand. Even the Rockefellers are a strand. The real power that's manipulating all this, you never see. It operates from the shadows. So it's operating to a central dictated policy. And this is why you're seeing the same things happen in all different countries at the same time. It's because the orders and the policy are coming from a central point. We can work on the level of banking scams, political scams, manipulated wars, manipulated 9/11s. And we should, because we need to know that. But if that's all we're doing in terms of communicating knowledge, then basically we're operating in a cycle of this is the problem, but how the hell do we get out of this? We will never know how to set ourselves free until we understand the nature of who we bloody well are. How do you set yourself free when you don't even know you are? How do you set yourself free when you don't even know the nature of reality that you're living in and manifesting and making happen without your knowledge that you're making it happen? You can't. So alongside the information about, the 5 sense level of this conspiracy, if you like, we have to just as powerfully, I would say more powerfully, communicate the nature of reality and how we are creating our reality and how we are allowing it to be created for us by having ourselves programmed with certain beliefs, certain perceptions and all the rest of it all the time. The two must go together. Otherwise, we're never going to get out of this.
And welcome back to Truth Frequency. I am Chris Gio, and I'm joined as always by Socio Student. We are speaking with Michael Tsarion. Don't forget his new DVD is out called Architects of Control, and you can find that at architectsofcontrol.com. It's an incredible watch, and I suggest that everybody runs out and picks up that DVD because it's absolutely amazing. You'll watch it 10 times over. Now, Michael, I said earlier in the interview that I want to direct it a little bit towards ClimateGate. I just basically want to get your take on that. Do you think that was a document that was genuinely leaked? Do you think there was perhaps a hidden agenda in bringing out that information? Because I saw that as a big victory where we were basically stopping their carbon tax. Or do you think it's maybe a case of two factions fighting with each other for control?
Well, again, if you ask 10 guys, they'll all say something different. My take on it is coming out of the world of psychology. What I noticed was that every so often, 10, 15 years, they wheel out something in order to, and the only word I can use is expatiate. A similar word is to exorcise, like a priest making an exorcism.
To bring it out.
Yeah, to bring it out. To bring out what? Every so often, they know that man's pent-up, rebellious, or just desperate energy needs to be vented. And with great skill, they put up a people's champion who represents what's known as the animus, or the father figure. And like a Pied Piper type, who will expertly, on the screen of the world, and I'm not saying that it doesn't have other threads. They're not killing, 6 or 7 birds with one stone here. But the way Michael Tsarion has looked at this it was with great interest, because I started to see that the whole story of ClimateGate, the whole story of global warming, is actually predicated on, is articulated to the whole story of man's psychology as to where it is now. But it's a matter of translating it and having the pattern recognition. For instance, let's give you an example. People who are familiar with the Edgar Cayce school, psychics, all sorts of people who prophesize gloom and doom and earthquakes and worldly cataclysms are often proved wrong. There's more of a history of them being proven wrong about earth changes than there is about them being ever proved right. This goes for even common or garden street level psychics, and it goes all the way up to even some of the most famous, very big names who bizarrely saw, look, I saw it. I really could see this. I saw the, the Ring of Fire. I saw California sink into the ocean. I've predicted all of these things. Since the 1970s and before, we've had a lot of this. But it doesn't come true. Well, a psychologist would say that what these people are seeing is the ruination or the coming unsettling of their own mind, their own ego. But the ego doesn't it doesn't want to own it. So a lot of these people in the psychic world project it outside. So when they see some sort of disaster, in which the Eiffel Tower is crumbling and falling to the ground and all hell's breaking loose. And if you come from that world as I do, you will have heard this many, many times. It happens to people. Then you follow these people's history and you find out about 2-3 years later they had a big mental breakdown. This is a very common thing. And it's because a lot of the catastrophe that they were seeing was actually something that was going on internally, but the ego has this weird way of displacing it. It's called displacement, and you project it outside and pretend and scare the bejesus out of everybody, and then should a little disaster happen somewhere in the world. Okay, so jump back to what Gore was doing. It's based on the same idea. But instead of one person, it's the collective. The collective unconscious needs to expatiate certain anxieties that are happening within the psychic temperament or complexion of the inner being. And the system, the big brothers, know this. And therefore they often articulate something that has to do with external climate, external topography, external geography. In fact, the whole thing with the crop circles is very much articulated to this. Again, but it works in a right brain way because they're using symbolism. In the rhetoric of the Gores and the Hitlers and anyone who's done this periodically, you see, is these talismanic terms that actually refer to this shadow self or the psychology. And that's what then causes the mass attraction to it, the mass goal. So even though they know that on paper their science is bogus through and through, even though they know that they're probably going to be, outwitted by real scientists and they're going to suffer that way and they're going to be compromised, they still have to go ahead with it for ritualistic purposes. Because everything that happens in our society, especially gigantic media-based rituals, is the only word I can use, like this Gore thing, are for ritualistic purposes. It doesn't matter if the mathematics, so to speak, adds up, if 2 and 2 doesn't equal 4, because they've got other purposes for doing it. That's how I read it.
Well, do you think that the information was genuinely leaked, or was there some kind of hidden agenda going on there?
That looks genuine to me.
Okay.
Well, it looked genuine to us, too. It's just such a shock that you wonder if some element of the New World Order intentionally leaked the information to bring in some part of their agenda, or if it was a genuine screw-up on their part.
They can easily screw up because, remember, one weakness in these hierarchical models that they have is that nobody likes anybody else. So should a bunch of guys have a personal peeve, or a bunch of guys have overheard chit-chat against them? This is within the corporate world I'm talking about, within the government, the politics, the UN, whatever. If they if they realize that they've been undercut, if injustice has been done to them, they're not going to feel bad about it by leaking the information. They've got the perfect way to do it right now, which is the media, the internet. So, of course, we must know that can happen legitimately. It's pretty obvious when it does. Then tie it back into what I was talking about, astrology, in which there's even a sort of a movement right now that will happen, that truth will out, so to speak, So I look at the truth is coming out in many ways, and this is one aspect that it happens in. But, of course, you always must be using your critical filter. Think before you leap, so to speak.
Do you think that's why they're bringing in Internet 2.0 to have full spectrum dominance on the web?
Yeah, that's another possibility. However, I'm optimistic because even if they try to crack down, the genius of man is that he'll create another one over here. So it's like pushing a balloon. They think they got a grip on it here, but what they don't see is that the other side of the balloon is ballooned more. The more
it's starting to bulge.
Yeah. The more they feel that they're going to, this is one of the downsides of acting repressively. During the time of the Saturnian paradigm, you could get away with it. You could just beat something over the head and it would work. Right now we're in a totally different paradigm. You might try to beat round, spheres into square holes and it's not going to happen. And they're not going to learn it, but this is what's happening. In the end, it almost becomes like some sort of, Portrait of Dorian Gray fiasco in which you stab at the canvas and then the knife is going into your own heart. These individuals will never learn except this way, because there is one definition and one definition only of a sociopath or a psychopath. And by the way, this is one way you can tell a sociopath, is that in the life of a sociopath, they are never, ever to blame. Even when it's obvious that they are to blame. Even if they've been cornered by 5,000 people and say, you are to blame, we've got the evidence, they go, no, it's somebody else's fault, it's somebody else's fault, it's somebody else's fault. The definition of a psychopath is they can never take responsibility for anything at all, ever. The only way that those people can learn is literally when their own evil returns in this weird dynamic that is basically something to do with the justice energy of the universe. It's not given into man's hands at all. It's something that nature itself does in its own unbelievably mysterious way. We can either choose to work with that force or we can work against it. For a long time we've been working against it. We've been given our enemy the very tools by which they can club us over the head. All we got to do is take it back. That can be done legally. It can be done in various other ways. But that's where the turning point is now. That's what we have to do now.
Well, Michael, my main concern is that, people are constantly bombarded with this mind control. You get in your car, you turn on the radio, you hear all these mind control talk shows. You turn on your TV, you're constantly being mind controlled. Billboards, it's just a constant bombardment left and right. Do you think that we can get out of this? Do you really think we can?
Yes, but the principles of true change are not what we have been ever taught to understand. Probably the only group in the world, apart from shamanic groups, who understand what true change is are sort of Taoist stroke Zen people. And even not too many of the Zens, because they're tied into Buddhism, and I think they've lost it as well. But pure Zen people, and certainly Taoists, know what true change is all about. It once used to be taught quite widely, and is no longer, but it's very much the center of my work, which I talk about deconstruction, or the Shiva cycle. True change can only take place, as the alchemist Figulus said, is when bodies are broken down or reduced to their first matter. This, of course, is extremely threatening to most people who believe that change is keeping all the baggage you've got and adding more. No, that's what man has been doing. That's what's called solar. That's patristic. That's hierarchical. In other words, you're actually making the same mistakes as the very enemy you want to pull down. How can you do that? It's like Punch and Judy. You're not going to get anywhere. As I say, the knife going into the canvas is going into your own soul. You must change the way you look at what change is. Western man has been taught that it's acquisitive, it's conquestative, it's aggressive. You will it into existence. You have it. It's ownership. It's gain. It's have. All of this very yang attitude towards life, and also towards change. Actually, spiritually, it's the reverse. It's letting go. It's abstinence. It's non-interference. It's asceticism, a certain form of mental asceticism. It's letting the thing pass. It's releasing yourself from it. It's no longer clutching it like some maniac. That is what causes real change. Or as the alchemist said, it's burning things down to its basic elements. And then from that, a new form is built. Now, that's what the planet Pluto in astrology represents. It's a part of the mind that is deconstructive, that is catabolic, that the Eastern people would call the Shiva model, you see. It's not destruction. That's another, again, a false way of looking at it. It's deconstruction. But we have been given so many false ideas about the nature of true change. We don't realize that it's cathartic. We don't realize that it's about letting go. And the West needs to understand this. Otherwise, there's not going to be real change. There's not going to be, what we'll do is keep on repeating, you see, the same methodology. Like Buckminster Fuller said, if you want to change something, don't keep repeating, or was it Einstein? Don't keep repeating the same way that you've been doing it before. You have to create a new model to replace the old model. And that's what we're being given the chance to do.
Yeah, but Michael, it's going to be a little difficult to get people to go in that direction and the global shift of consciousness to shift in that direction. I mean, people love their slavery and they look for all these escapes from reality so they don't have to deal with it.
Yeah. People fear that, and they have anxiety, and therefore they run, as you said, into all the authentic escapes, hoping that they can fall asleep, hoping that they don't have to think about it. Because again, as I've said so many times in my work, one of the biggest reasons that you see the world in the shape that it's in is because people have got no balls. And excuse my language, but they got no courage anymore. And I don't know if it's because the real people are lying in graves, who had the guts to fight, are all dead and buried because they actually were the ones who went and fought in the First and Second World War and all the other horrific things that have happened. And what's left is just genetic garbage, I don't know. Or it's just because something has happened. Maybe it is the conditioning. Or maybe it's too much affluence. Or I actually do believe it's a, combination of a lot of things. But the fact of the matter is, if people just had a little bit of guts to fall in love with the word no,
we wouldn't have half the problems we do today.
Yeah. First of all, they'd realize that you can turn politics back. If you misguidingly voted somebody or some rule or law in, and then the Congress goes and abuses it, or a politician goes and abuses it, or a president abuses it, you can take it back. If George Bush goes and signs illegal executive orders, if Obama does it, you can turn that back. You have ways of doing it. Don't just think it's all one way. We can't reverse it. We can't reverse untold immigration. We can't reverse, outsourcing. Of course you can. But the thing is that man has lost his guts. He just simply does not have it anymore.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think there's another factor that we need to look at, though. People are just flat out lazy. I mean, we live in the biggest welfare state in the world. People want everything provided for them, and now they even want universal health care. They think the government should provide their health care. Well, what happened to take responsibility for yourself?
I know.
I mean, that's exactly what I'm talking about. People want to be free, but they don't want to be responsible as free people. So I guess the next question that I would pose to you, Mike, is what do we do with these people and how do we reach them?
Well, you don't. Well, at least I don't. If you ask again 10 other researchers, they'll tell you different things. My motive is never to waken up mankind.
What is it, just to shake them up real well?
Not even that. It's because I have a policy of non-intervention, what's called, it's hard to explain. It's like non-interference because don't you see the paradox? If you try to go and shake somebody awake, aren't you actually violating their freedom?
Yeah, from that perspective, you are.
Right. Good.
But, Michael, we're still faced with the problem that they're bringing us down with them, so we have to do something about it, don't we?
No. You can defend yourself. I get your point, though. I would say that you provide signposts, but you can't walk the road for people. That's what I kind of do in my life. But what I do more than that is this knowledge is basically starts with me, number one. I know that sounds very egotistical, but what else can you do? If I don't own it, how can I dare ask somebody else? I do what my work is, and then people come to it. They come to it when they're ready. They pick it up. They don't like it. They throw it down. But we have to be very cautious about going and violating the sphere of whatever people have set up for themselves, even if it's a lie. Perhaps we're not even meant to go in there and have the right to change it. We went into this in the Architects of Control DVD in the second disc, and we asked this question. And I am my personal belief is that no, you're not allowed to violate the ignorance factor of somebody else because it's up to them to make the change. It's another form of dictatorship. It's another form of totalitarian action when even as a presumed teacher or even out of the best motives that you go there and try to ram something down somebody's throat or condemn them or whatever, it's not important because we have to have, well, first of all, like I said, we don't want to repeat the very actions of the people that we claim to be opposed to. And two, there may be even a spiritual law that says that the ignorance